In a family of overachievers, I was the invisible one. My older sister was the valedictorian, the beauty queen, the golden child. My younger brother was the athlete, the genius, the boy who could do no wrong. And me, I was just there, the one my parents forgot to pick up from school, the one whose artwork never made it on the fridge, the one they introduced as our other daughter. For 40 years, I lived in their shadows, believing I was nothing special. But shadows have a way of hiding what's meant to grow in the dark. And when I finally stepped into the light, they had no idea what was coming. Hello. Welcome to Hurt Stories. Let me tell you about my family. We were the Harrisons. In our small town, that name meant something. My father was a respected surgeon, the kind of man who saved lives and was thanked at dinner parties. My mother was a former beauty queen turned society matron, the kind of woman who chaired charity galas and knew everyone who mattered. They were the perfect couple, the golden pair, the center of every room they entered. They had 3 children, my older sister, Victoria, my younger brother, James, and me, Evelyn. I was the middle child, the forgotten one, the one who got lost in the shuffle. Victoria was born first, and she was everything my parents wanted. Beautiful, brilliant, charismatic. She walked at 10 months, talked at 12, read at 3. By the time she was in high school, she was valedictorian, homecoming queen, and headed to an Ivy League university. She was the sun, and we all orbited around her. James came last, and he was everything my father wanted. Athletic, competitive, a natural leader. He was captain of every team, president of every club, the boy who could do no wrong. When he got a scholarship to a top university, my father cried with pride. James was the heir, the legacy, the one who would carry on the Harrison name. And then there was me. I was born between them, 2 years after Victoria, 3 years before James. I arrived quietly, and I stayed that way. I wasn't beautiful like Victoria. I was plain, with mousy hair and glasses and a tendency to fade into the background. I wasn't brilliant like her either. I was a solid B student, good enough but not exceptional. I wasn't athletic like James. I had no interest in sports, no talent for competition. I was just me. Quiet, thoughtful, invisible. My parents didn't neglect me. They just forgot me, not in any dramatic way. There were no locked doors or cruel words, just 1,000 small oversights that added up to a lifetime of feeling unseen. They forgot to pick me up from school, more than once. I'd wait on the curb for an hour, watching other kids get collected by their parents, until finally the school secretary would call home and remind them I existed. They forgot my birthday. Twice. Not the big ones, they remembered those eventually with a cake and presents that felt like afterthoughts. But the in-between years, the ones that didn't matter, those slipped through the cracks. They forgot to come to my events. School plays, art shows, recitals. Victoria's events were circled on the calendar in red. James's games were mandatory attendance. But my things, they were optional, and somehow they were always too busy. I remember one night when I was 12, I had a small part in the school play. Just a few lines, nothing major. But I was excited. I practiced for weeks. I made my parents promise to come. The night of the play, I stood backstage, peeking through the curtain, looking for them in the audience. The lights went down. The play started. I delivered my lines. I did my best. And when I looked out at the sea of faces, I couldn't find them anywhere. They never came. They'd forgotten. Victoria had a debate competition that night, and they'd gone to that instead. My play was just not important enough to remember. I didn't say anything. I never did. I just went home, went to my room, and added it to the list of times I'd been overlooked. That was my role in the family. The quiet one, the easy one. The one who didn't make waves, didn't demand attention, didn't require anything. I was the backup, the afterthought, the one they remembered only when they needed something. I learned early that the only way to survive in that house was to be useful, so I made myself useful. I helped with chores. I ran errands. I listened to Victoria's problems and celebrated James's victories. I was the support system, the sounding board, the invisible scaffolding that held up the golden children. And I told myself it was enough. I told myself I didn't need attention, didn't need recognition, didn't need to be seen. I was fine. I was fine. I was fine. I was lying. As we grew older, the comparisons became more explicit. Victoria went to Yale. She graduated with honors, then went to law school, then became a partner at a prestigious firm. She married a handsome doctor and had 2 perfect children and lived in a perfect house in a perfect neighborhood. She was on magazine covers, interviewed as a woman to watch, celebrated everywhere she went. James went to Stanford on a football scholarship. He played professionally for a few years, then retired and started a successful business. He married a former model and had 3 children and traveled the world and donated money to charities and was featured in Forbes. He was the golden boy, the success story, the pride of the family. And me. I went to the state university. Nothing wrong with that. It was a good school, a solid education. But compared to Yale and Stanford, it was invisible. I got a degree in education, then a master's in counseling. I became a high school guidance counselor. A good one, I think. I helped kids figure out their lives, find their paths, believe in themselves. But it wasn't Yale, it wasn't Stanford. It wasn't magazine covers or Forbes features, it was just me, quiet, solid, invisible. At family gatherings, the conversation always revolved around Victoria and James. Their achievements, their children, their lives. My parents would beam with pride as they recounted. Victoria's latest court victory or James's latest business deal. They'd show photos and clippings and brag to anyone who would listen. And me, they'd introduce me as our other daughter. Not by name, just the other one. The one who wasn't worth remembering. Sometimes when I was feeling brave, I'd mention something about my work. A student I'd helped, a success story I'd been part of. My parents would nod politely, then turn back to Victoria and James. My stories were just less interesting, less impressive, less worthy of attention. I learned to stop sharing. I learned to sit quietly, smile, and listen. I became the audience for my siblings' lives, the witness to their triumphs, the forgotten daughter in the corner. There was one Christmas, I remember, when I'd just finished my master's degree. I was proud of myself, really proud. It had taken me years working full-time and going to school at night, and I'd done it. I'd earned it. I showed up at my parents' house for Christmas dinner. Victoria was there with her perfect family. James was there with his. My parents were glowing as always. Dinner was lovely as always. And no one mentioned my degree. No one asked about my work. No one noticed that I'd accomplished something too. Finally, as we were having dessert, I brought it up myself, casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Oh, by the way, I finished my master's. I'm officially a counselor now. There was a pause, a brief, uncomfortable pause. Then my mother smiled and said, "That's nice, dear. Victoria, tell everyone about your new case." And that was it. My achievement dismissed. My moment stolen, my existence invisible. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried. Quietly, so no one would hear. Then I went back to the table, smiled, and finished my dessert, because that's what the forgotten daughter does. She doesn't make waves. She doesn't demand attention. She just fades into the background and waits for it to be over. The turning point came when I was 43 years old. I'd been a guidance counselor for nearly 2 decades. I was good at my job, really good. I'd helped hundreds of kids find their way. I'd been named Counselor of the Year for our district. I'd even been asked to speak at a state conference. But none of that mattered to my family. I was still invisible, still forgotten. still the other daughter. Then my father got sick. It was sudden and terrible. A stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak. My mother was devastated. Victoria was too busy with her career to help. James lived across the country and couldn't get away. The responsibility fell to me. I didn't hesitate. I took a leave of absence from work. I moved into my parents' house. I cared for my father around the clock, feeding him, bathing him, taking him to appointments, sitting with him through the long, silent nights. Those months were the hardest and most precious of my life. My father couldn't speak, but he could listen. And for the first time in my life, he listened to me. I talked to him for hours, about my work, my students, my dreams. I told him things I'd never told anyone, about feeling invisible, about wishing he'd seen me, about the day he forgot my play. He couldn't respond, but I saw tears in his eyes. I saw regret. I saw love. Maybe it was too little, too late, but it was something. It was more than I'd ever had when he died. 3 months later, I was holding his hand. Just like the forgotten daughter, holding the hand of the father who'd forgotten her. And in that moment, I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to. The funeral was a production. Victoria flew in and took over, organizing everything, making sure she was the center of attention. James gave a beautiful eulogy, talking about what a great man our father was. My mother sat in the front row, receiving condolences from everyone who mattered. And me. I stood in the back, invisible as always. No one knew that I'd been the one caring for him. No one knew that I'd held his hand when he died. No one knew that I'd spent 3 months of my life being the daughter he'd never really seen. I went home after the funeral, to my small apartment, my quiet life, my invisible existence. And I sat on my couch and thought about what came next. I was 43 years old. I'd spent my whole life being forgotten. I'd spent my whole life being useful, being quiet, being invisible. And what had it gotten me? Nothing. Less than nothing. I'd given everything and received nothing in return. Something shifted that night. Something broke and something else began to grow. I made a decision. A radical, terrifying, life-changing decision. I was going to stop being invisible. I was going to stop being useful. I was going to stop being the forgotten daughter. I was going to become someone. Not for them, never for them, for me. The first thing I did was go back to school. Not for another degree, I had enough of those. For something I'd always wanted but never allowed myself to pursue. I enrolled in a creative writing program. I'd always loved writing, always filled notebooks with stories and poems and thoughts. But I'd never taken it seriously. It was just a hobby, a private thing, something I did in the margins of my invisible life. Now I made it central. I wrote every day. Short stories, essays, poems. I wrote about growing up invisible. I wrote about the forgotten daughter. I wrote about grief and loss and the slow, painful process of becoming visible to yourself. My teachers encouraged me. They said I had talent. They said my voice was unique. They said I should submit my work for publication. I was terrified, but I did it anyway. The first piece I submitted was a personal essay about being the middle child in a family of overachievers. I called it The Invisible Daughter. I sent it to a small literary magazine, not expecting anything. They published it. I stared at the acceptance email for an hour, crying and laughing and shaking. Someone had seen me. Someone had read my words and thought they mattered. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to them. More publications followed. More essays, more stories. I started a blog. People found it. They wrote to me, hundreds of them, saying my words had touched them, saying they, too, had been the forgotten one, saying I'd given them hope. I'd spent my whole life helping kids find their way. Now I was helping adults, too, not through counseling, but through words, through truth. Through the simple, radical act of saying what I'd always felt. The book came next. An agent read my blog and reached out. She asked if I'd ever thought about writing a memoir. I laughed and said no. She said I should think about it. I thought about it for 6 months. Then I said yes. Writing that book was the hardest thing I've ever done. I had to go back to all those moments I'd buried. The forgotten birthdays, the missed events, the endless comparisons, the feeling of being invisible in my own family. I had to relive every painful memory, every small betrayal, every moment of being overlooked, but I also had to write the rest. The turning point, the decision, the rise. I had to show that invisibility wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The book came out when I was 46. It was called The Forgotten Daughter, a memoir of invisibility and becoming seen. It was a small press, no big marketing budget, no guarantees. I didn't expect much. I just wanted my story out there. I wanted someone to hear it. Someone did. The book started slowly, then caught fire. Word of mouth, reviews. Features, suddenly I was being interviewed. Suddenly I was getting speaking requests. Suddenly I was on podcasts and radio shows, and eventually, national television. I was visible. For the first time in my life, I was visible. I traveled the country, speaking to audiences of women who'd been forgotten like me. They came up to me after events, crying, hugging me, telling me their stories. They said I'd given them permission to be seen. They said I'd given them hope. I'd spent my whole life helping people, quietly, invisibly. Now I was helping them loudly, publicly, visibly, and it was everything. Of course, my family noticed. At first, they didn't know what to make of it. My book came out, and suddenly their friends were asking about me. "Is that your daughter, the one who wrote the book? We saw her on TV." My mother didn't know how to respond. She'd never had to talk about me before. Victoria called me. For the first time in years, she called me. She said she'd read the book. She said it was good. She said she was proud of me. I didn't know how to feel about that. Victoria, the golden child, saying she was proud of me. It should have felt good. It should have felt like validation, finally, after all these years. But it didn't. It felt hollow, because where was she when I needed her? Where was she when I was invisible? She was busy being visible, being celebrated, being the sun I orbited around. She didn't have time for me then. Why should I care about her pride now? James called too. He was effusive, enthusiastic, full of praise. He said he'd always known I had it in me. He said he was so proud to be my brother. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think he meant it. But I remembered all those family gatherings, all those conversations that revolved around him and Victoria, all those times my achievements were dismissed. He hadn't always known. He'd never noticed. And his pride now felt like appropriation, like he was claiming a piece of my success without having earned it. My mother was the hardest. She came to one of my book signings, sat in the back, watched me speak, watched people line up to meet me. Afterward, she approached me with tears in her eyes. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't realized. She said she was proud of me. I looked at my mother, the woman who'd forgotten my birthdays, missed my plays, introduced me as the other daughter, and I felt nothing, not anger, not forgiveness, just a hollow emptiness where love should have been. I thanked her for coming. I signed a book for her. And I went back to the line of people who actually saw me, who actually valued me, who actually made me feel visible. The hardest conversation was with Victoria. We met for coffee, just the two of us. She wanted to talk about the book, about our childhood, about everything. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. I wanted to see if she understood. I wanted to see if she could see me now. She started by apologizing. She said she hadn't known how much I'd struggled. She said she'd been so focused on her own life that she hadn't noticed mine. She said she wished she'd been a better sister. I listened, I nodded, and then I told her the truth. I told her about the day they forgot my play, I told her about the Christmas when my master's degree was dismissed. I told her about the years of being introduced as the other daughter. I told her about feeling invisible in my own family, in my own life. She cried. She said she was sorry. She said she never meant to hurt me. I believe her. I do. Victoria wasn't malicious. She was just self-absorbed, focused, driven. She didn't notice me because she didn't need to notice me. I was just the background, the support system, the one who held things up while she soared. But here's the thing about being invisible. It teaches you to see. It teaches you to notice the people who are overlooked, to value the ones who are forgotten, to understand that everyone has a story, even if no one's listening. Victoria had never learned that. She'd never had to. I told her I accepted her apology. I told her I was glad she'd read my book. I told her I hoped we could move forward differently, as adults who saw each other clearly. But I also told her that I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Not to her, not to anyone. I was visible now, and I was staying that way. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she'd try to do better. We'll see. So here I am. 50 years old, visible, successful, happy. My book has been translated into 12 languages. I've spoken on stages around the world. I've been interviewed by people I used to admire from afar. I've won awards I never dreamed of, but that's not the success that matters. The success that matters is the girl who wrote to me last week, saying my book saved her life. The woman who came to a signing and told me she'd finally left her abusive husband after reading my chapter on self-worth. The teenager who said my story made her feel less alone in her own invisible family. That's the success. That's the victory, not the awards or the attention or the money. The connection, the visibility, the chance to be seen and to help others feel seen too. My family still doesn't quite know what to do with me. My mother calls sometimes, asks about my work, tells me she's proud. Victoria and I have a tentative, careful relationship, better than before, but not what you'd call close. James sends me articles about himself, still needing to compete, still needing to be seen. I don't need their validation anymore. I don't need their attention. I don't need to be visible to them. I'm visible to myself. And that's enough. I think about the forgotten daughter sometimes. The girl who waited on the curb, watching other kids get picked up. The girl whose artwork never made it on the fridge. The girl who learned to be invisible because it was safer than being seen. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I wish I could sit next to her on that curb and put my arm around her and say, you're not invisible. You're just waiting. Waiting for the moment when you'll step into the light and show them all what you're made of. Waiting for the moment when being unseen becomes a superpower because it taught you to see everyone else. Waiting for the moment when you realize that the people who forgot you were never the ones who mattered. The forgotten daughter became the successful one, not despite being forgotten. Because of it, because being invisible taught me to listen. Because being overlooked taught me to notice. Because being forgotten taught me to remember. Remember the ones who are still waiting, still hopping, still believing that one day someone will see them. I see you. If you're listening to this and you're the forgotten one, I see you. And I'm telling you, your time is coming. Keep going, keep growing, keep becoming. They forgot you, but you won't forget yourself. And one day, you'll step into the light, and they won't believe what they've been missing. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.